Thank you for joining us today. If you are not an ATA member, please consider joining at https://atalink.org/become a member. The views expressed in this presentation are those of the speaker and do not reflect the official policy or position of the United States Air Force, the Department of Defense, the United States government, or the Airlift Tanker Association. Welcome to the Airlift Tanker Association Symposium 2020. It is my pleasure to introduce General Retired Duncan J. McNabb, the chairman of the Airlift Tanker Association, to kick off this year's event.
Mobility Warriors, on behalf of the Airlift Tanker Association, General Van Ovost, and our president, Chief Master Sergeant Mike Curver, it is truly my honor to welcome you to our 52nd convention, as we recognize that air mobility is one of our nation's greatest asymmetric advantages, giving us the strategic ability to move. And most importantly, we honor the magnificent mobility airmen who make it happen, and that is you. Our theme this year, Connecting Mobility Warriors in the Digital Age, Big Data, Artificial Intelligence, and the Roaring 20s version 2.0, seems amazingly appropriate as so much of our everyday life is now done virtually, including this convention. And what a challenging year. But in this time and in this space, we come together to celebrate what we do. We come together for a myriad of reasons that despite the COVID-19 pandemic, hurricanes, wildfires, earthquakes, and unrest, all of you continue to answer the call to serve, to raise your hand for freedom and give hope to people in need. There were so many memorable events you all have done. In projecting decisive strength, the rapid delivery of the 82nd Airborne to CENTCOM in response to Iranian aggression, developing ABMS and JADC-2 on-ramps, performing the first KC-46 Oceanic Coronet, performing Agile Combat Employment ACE exercises with ACC, having the largest C-130J formation ever, refueling Thunderbirds and Blue Angels during salute to first responders across the country. And in delivering hope, delivering COVID-19 PPE throughout the globe, developing and executing COVID-19 patient transport, delivering humanitarian aid to Beirut, delivering humanitarian aid to the Caribbean, St. Kitts and Nevis, following devastating hurricanes, delivering humanitarian aid to Colombia to aid them with the Venezuela refugee crisis, and day in and day out doing our mission of providing rapid global mobility and sustainment for America's armed forces to every corner of the world. We come together to learn from each who will speak this year and hear their viewpoints and ask questions directly to them. For professional development of our Air Mobility Command personnel and total force mobility partners in the Air Force Reserve and Air National Guard, We come together to recognize our 2020 Hall of Fame recipient, Colonel retired Rocky Lane, AMC Award winners, and our Tampa Bay and Abilene Award winners. We come together to hear from our most senior leadership, including the Assistant Secretary of the Air Force, the Honorable Sean Manasco, our Chief of Staff of the Air Force, General C.Q. Brown, our Operational Commander, U.S. Transcom Commanding General, General Steve Lyons, our new Chief Master Sergeant of the Space Force, Chief Master Sergeant Toberman, and our new Air Mobility Command's leadership with keynotes by General Jackie Van Ovost and Chief Brian Grzelnik. To hear from our Guard and Reserve Commander's perspective on our total force. Our Air Force and AMC does total force better than anyone, and Lieutenant General Mike Lowe and Lieutenant General Rich Scobie will tell you why. To hear from Simon Sinek, the renowned author of Why Great Leaders Inspire Everyone to Take Action. Finally, we come together to celebrate our legacy and our heroes. Colonel retired Dale Halverson, the Candy Bomber, just turned 100 on 10 October. Happy birthday, dear friend. I encourage you to participate in Gail Halverson's Aviation Education Foundation. A great way to commemorate Gail's 100th birthday would be to donate a brick through the Candy Bomber webpage. You can also donate through the ATA page donate button. We have a dynamic virtual event planned for the next 3 days. To navigate through the agenda and website, we have provided detailed instructions under the About the Convention tab on our website. Our website provides you all the same areas of focus that we do in our in-person events. Our keynote speaker lineup includes several of the nation's top leaders, and you will be able to ask questions during these sessions. Your moderator will provide detailed instructions on how to ask questions. We will have 12 seminars during specific time frame each day, and additional seminars on demand that you can view anytime. The virtual exhibit hall is available for your viewing during this week as well. We have included videos of all our award winners on our site. Finally, I must take this time to recognize our convention committee, Patty Cost, Carrie Wagemont, Brian Rokemeyer, Gino Corvota, Lieutenant Colonel Popeye Fafinsky, Tom Cost, and Chris Kelly. They have worked very hard to ensure our agenda is packed with informative speakers, seminars, and includes interfacing with our industry leaders and learning about their new technology in our virtual exhibit hall. This is a new experience for all of us. Chief Kerber and I again welcome your input as we navigate uncharted airways these next few days. With that said, Mobility Warriors, I formally declare this convention and the Technology Exposition Hall open. Now, to kick off in the proper fashion, we have a patriotic video that celebrates our service. Created by Major General Maggie Woodward and Brigadier General Dan Woodward, two of my favorite people. I've known Maggie and Dan for many years. Maggie commanded a mobility squadron, 2 mobility wings, and a numbered Air Force. Later today in a seminar, she will also be presenting her experience as a Combined Forces Air Component Commander during Operation Odyssey Dawn, the American-led air campaign over Libya. She was the first ever female CFAC ever. Pretty cool, eh? I got to know Dan well when I served as chairman of the board for Arnold Air Society and Silver Wings, a great nonprofit dedicated to building superior Air Force leaders and civilian air power advocates. Dan was and still is the lead executive director, with Maggie being his co-director. So these two continue to give big, and they do it great. With that said, you're in for a treat. The first time I saw this presentation was at an Arnold Air Society and Silver Wings National Conclave, and it had such a profound impact on me that I never forgot it. Concentrate on the incredible pictures and words that are brought to life today and walk away with a renewed sense of patriotism and pride in our nation. With that, I hope you enjoy the following presentation of America's Photo Album, a story that most definitely comes from the hearts of two great airmen. Popeye, over to you.
Welcome to America's Photo Album, inspired gratitude for our mobility patriots.
Good morning, General McNabb, Chief Kerber, and members and guests of the Airlift Tanker Association. Maggie and I thank you for the opportunity to bring this presentation to you today. For years, the Airlift Tanker Association has been a leader in strengthening our Air Force by helping to build more skilled and professional airmen, and by supporting the development of air mobility capabilities. We are honored to be part of the organization and with so many great airmen this morning. The origins of this talk rest in the aftermath of 9/11. In October 2001, we stumbled upon a unique family photo album neither of us had seen before. As we looked through the album and considered how unified our nation had become, as evidenced by the signs of "Let's Roll" and "United We Stand," and the flags that really were everywhere around us, we thought, wouldn't it be nice if America had a photo album that reminded us all of who we are and what we stand for? And so we put pen to paper and assembled the images that provided the foundation of our talk today. Images and words we hope remind us all that we really are the United States of America.
Were we the keepers of this photo album, the first photograph we would place in its pages would be the photograph of the eyes of a serviceman or woman. These eyes would have seen centuries of world history and all at once would tell the story of the gift of unprecedented service and sacrifice that we pause to recognize today. They would be etched with pain, bright with happiness, clouded with tears, and clearly focused. This photograph would tell the story of Colonel Robert Sturm, who was shot down and taken prisoner in 1967 while flying a combat mission over Hanoi, and who returned home to Travis Air Force Base in 1973. Last off the aircraft, he said simply, "Thank you for this enthusiastic reception. God bless you, and God bless America." Then he turned toward the crowd and found his daughter racing toward him with arms outstretched. Her joyful eyes, captured in that instant, said more in a single moment than any nation could ever say to those who serve. "You are forever free in our arms." This photograph would tell the story of a Southerner who penned music that was ultimately blended to words by a Northern poet, and that today lives on as the battle hymn of the Republic. From Cold Harbor to Gettysburg, Vicksburg, Fredericksburg, the Bloody Angle, those who have gone before us have seen him in the watchfires of 100 circling camps. This photograph would tell the story of Major Rhonda Cornum, who was shot down and captured by the Iraqis during Desert Storm. On her return to the United States, her eyes held a distant, hollow stare and visible marks from beatings and torture. But they also held a measure of defiance and confidence, for she and we serve a higher calling, and no one will ever beat us down. And so this single photograph of the eyes of a serviceman or woman would tell thousands of stories of hope, fear, peace, war, honor, and courage that come from lifetimes of service and that are ultimately brought to bear in the moments of greatest consequence for our nation. And this single photograph would also hold the answer to a question first asked by Francis Scott Key. "Oh, say can you see by the dawn's early light?" We know the answer will forever be yes, for on our watch, our star-spangled banner will forever fly over the land of the free and the home of the brave, making us ask this question: where do we find these heroes?
The next photograph we would place in America's photo album would be a photograph of the hands of a serviceman or woman. These hands would have shaped centuries of world history, and all at once would tell the story of the gift of unprecedented service and sacrifice that we pause to recognize today. They would be deeply etched with lines of experience, torn and bloodied, raised to the sky, palm to palm, shaping stories that take us from the hell of war to those told by the most innocent, who also serve in ways unimagined. This photograph would tell the story of a U.S. Marine whose image was captured cradling a near-dead infant found face down and in the dirt under a rock during the Battle for Saipan in 1944. It would be the hands of an American soldier who, despite extremely heavy fire, reached out and carried 2 Vietnamese children to safety during the fall of Saigon. Or the hands of Marine Gunnery Sergeant Jeremiah Purdie, who, despite his own injuries, reached out to help a comrade in agony after a fierce firefight to control a Vietnamese hill known simply as 484. It would be the hands of airmen who, for more than a century, have known a world without boundaries, and borrowing from the poem High Flight, have taken their aircraft with silent lifting mind into the high untrespassed sanctity of space, and put out their hand and touched the face of God. It would be a photograph of the hands of the Tuskegee Airmen, who as aviators understood that no ocean was too large to cross, no mountain too high to crest, and no valley too deep to forge. And as men, understood that every challenge had to be overcome in the defense of their nation. It would be the photograph of the hands of the women air service pilots of World War II, who as aviators understood that artificial ceilings were no match for the dedicated, defiant, and courageous. And as women understood that when General Arnold called, their reply of "Send me," shouted loud and clear in the defense of their nation, could never be quieted. These hands would be the hands of compassion, competence, hope, strength, and courage. They would be the hands that open and stretch across the world, touching those who live in oppression, with the words at the base of the Statue of Liberty that say, "Give me your tired, your poor, your huddled masses, yearning to breathe free."
The third photograph we would place in the album would be the photograph of the footsteps of a serviceman or woman. These footsteps would have marched across centuries of world history, and all at once would tell the story of the gift of unprecedented service and sacrifice that we pause to recognize today. This photograph would tell the story of astronaut Neil Armstrong, who on July 20th, 1969, took one small step as a man, but made one giant leap for mankind. His footprints for all eternity will stand next to an American flag that will forever watch over the land of the free and the home of the brave from the highest of the high ground. This photograph would tell the story of thousands of soldiers, sailors, airmen, and Marines whose footprints have defended our nation from tyranny, despair, misery, and oppression. From Ploesti to Midway, Libya, Bagram, Bosnia, Kuwait City, Hanoi, and so many thousands of other places, the footprints of our servicemen and women have answered the call. And no amount of ocean waves, wind, heat, snow, rain, or time will ever wash them from the history of the world. This photograph would lead us from the dusty streets of Ramadi and Camp Liberty to the mountains of Afghanistan, Kandahar, and Combat Outpost Keating. And it would recognize the extraordinary reality that in many cases, the same footsteps from the same servicemen and women have traveled to these places 2, 3, 4, and even more times in the last decade, reminding us again of the question we asked earlier: where do we find these heroes? This photograph would be the footsteps of thousands who defended the Philippines and then who died at the hands of oppression during the Bataan Death March. And they would be the footsteps of General MacArthur as he waded ashore in the Philippines some 2 years later, proving to the world that no matter how great the threat to freedom, those who serve shall return. 20 years later, General MacArthur penned the following words that should remain with us always: duty, honor, country. Those three hallowed words reverently dictate what you ought to be, what you can be, what you will be. They are your rallying points. To build courage when courage seems to fail, to regain faith when there seems to be little cause for faith, to create hope when hope becomes forlorn.
The last photograph we would place in the photo album would be a photograph of the spirit of a serviceman or woman. This spirit would have moved centuries of world history forward, and all at once would tell the story of the gift of unprecedented service and sacrifice that we pause to recognize today. It would confirm grace truly has been shed across our land, and that the magnificence of our nation is seen most clearly in the hearts of those who choose to serve its people. It would tell the story of 6 Marines who, on the jagged and rocky top of Mount Suribachi, raised our colors over Iwo Jima, and at the same time raised the spirit of our nation for a decade, and another, and another, proving that inside the hearts of those who serve, uncommon valor is truly a common virtue. This photograph would affirm for the world that even in the darkest days of conflict, American values will never yield to those seeking to repress hope and freedom, because American airmen stand ready to boldly make history rather than just witness it. This photograph would remind everyone that among us are servicemen and women with stories untold that are every bit as compelling and heroic as those we have just told. This photograph would capture the spirit of camaraderie that only brothers and sisters who have flown and stood and sailed together in the chaos of battle can truly understand. It would reflect the unique perspectives shared by those who serve on life and courage and fear that can only come from having faced an enemy while knowing just one thing for certain, that to their left and to their right were comrades who would die for them and for whom they would die. It would show in light and color the spirit that comes from a commitment to serving something greater than ourselves in the world's most remote and desolate places, standing watch while our nation sleeps, ensuring the wire is not breached, the barrier not crossed, and our skies are secure. This photograph would also show the times we were at peace, when the spirit of those who serve said to the world that our freedom will not be challenged and our liberty not taken, not on our watch, but instead it will be offered to all those who wish to embrace it. And it would show the incredible generosity of servant leaders who, when faced with a child or innocent citizen in some foreign land who simply needed a hand to lift them up, offered that hand without condition, even when no one was looking. We asked earlier, where do we find these heroes?
The answer is they are among us. In the towns and streets of America, from the rocky coast of Maine to the great cities of California and Hawaii, and from the mountains of the great Northwest to the beaches of Florida and Puerto Rico, they are among us. They are on the farms and in the fields of the Midwest, on horseback in the Great Plains, in classrooms and schools across the nation. They are in the streets of our cities, on our athletic fields, and in every American family. They are among us. In fact, they are among us today. They're boomers, port dogs, maintainers, loadmasters, pilots, transporters, supply specialists, medics, flight attendants, cops, and so many others, airmen all, from the greatest Air Force the world has ever known. Fairchild, MacDill, Little Rock, Andrews, Ramstein, Dover, Travis, and deserts, jungles, mountains, and valleys around the globe are their homes. You see, they're really just like everyone else. That is, until such time as our nation calls on them to be unlike anyone else. And then they become our heroes. Only one nation has the ability to project forces globally. Only one nation would launch a C-17 mission to save just one soldier, sailor, airman, Marine, or Coast Guardsman. Only one nation would look to its youngest to create innovative solutions in just weeks to safely transport those afflicted with a deadly and contagious virus. Only one nation would literally move mountains to save the lives of people in a distant land devastated by war or famine or natural disaster. And that's because only one nation has Air Mobility Command airmen like you. And thank God we do. Despite the enormous challenges we face today, you have elected to serve a cause greater than yourselves. You understand that servant leaders are built, not born, and that the heart of a true servant leader works long after the lights of others are out each night. Through your eyes, your hands, your footsteps, and your spirits, you affirm for generations that went before you that the future of our great nation is without parallel. Even as you deeply respect the extraordinary legacy of the greatest generation, you challenge the idea that your generation cannot be greater still. You're airmen who understand at your core what one former POW following years of torture and captivity affirmed, that to be born in freedom is luck, to live in freedom is a privilege, and to die in freedom is a responsibility. We're honored to be with so many mobility heroes today. We salute you, we respect you, we believe in you, we trust in you, and we are grateful that you continue to carry the torch. We know you live lives of integrity, empathy, decency, and courage, and we ask that you continue to defend our story, our soul, by placing new photographs in America's album that will inspire generations yet unborn. We know you face unique challenges, but we also know that America's photo album is filled with lessons that affirm time and again that while our Air Force is small, the stories of its airmen are enormously consequential. And so we close with some questions. What can we learn from the eyes of a girl welcoming her father home after years of heroic service as a prisoner of war? What can we see in the eyes of a Medal of Honor recipient who declared, "We're going in," when the odds of coming out were next to zero? What message did the hands of Gunnery Sergeant Jeremiah Purdie carry to all of us on Hill 484? Will we always recall those three hallowed words that reverently dictate what we ought to be, what we can be, what we will be? Will we remember the broken but resilient spirit of a young wife sleeping next to a flag-draped casket, not just one day a year, but every day of the year? The answers will never be found on a smartphone, an iPad, or in a bank account. They will instead be found in our eyes, hands, footsteps, and spirits, and in the lives of service richly lived. These are the foundations of character and leadership, and they define all of you as the world's greatest airmen in the world's greatest Air Force. We thank you for that, and we know your nation does as well.
The views expressed in this presentation are those of the speaker and do not reflect the official policy or position of the United States Air Force, the Department of Defense, the United States government, or the Airlift Tanker Association. Thank you for joining us today. If you are not an ATA member, please consider joining at https://atalink.org/become-a-member. Thank you for participating in our virtual presentation. Please close this window and return to the agenda on our website to view another presentation.